What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. In this video I want to talk to you about using return statements in Python functions. Now, a Python function is basically a collection of code that performs a specific task, and we want to perform that task, we call the function. And a lot of times when we're calling Python functions, we kind of call it and it does its thing and we move on with the program. But sometimes when we call a function, we want to get some information back from that function. In other words, when I call a function, I want it to basically execute all the code, then I want it to give me some information back. So that could be something like a particular value, or it could be something like telling me how the task went. Basically, the function can just communicate back to us and say like, hey, here's some information, and that's what the return keyword can allow us to do. The return keyword can basically allow Python to return information from that function. So I'm going to show you guys how we can do this. I want to create a very simple function, and it's going to cube a number. So when we cube a number, we'll take it to the power of 3. So if I was to cube a number like 2, it would be 2 raised to the power of 3, right? That's pretty much basic math. So we're going to make a function that will cube a number, and I'll show you guys how we can use that return statement. So the first thing I want to do is make a function. I'm going to say def cube, and we'll call the function cube. And over here we can specify any parameters that this function will take. So basically any values that we want to give to this function. We're going to give it one parameter, which is going to be a number, and I'm going to call it num. Then I can come over here and I can type out a colon. So then down here we can put any of the code that we want to be included in this function, and basically this function is going to take a number and cube it. So I can type out num times num times num times num. That's going to give us num cubed. That's all well and good. If I come down here, I can execute this function. I can basically just call the function. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in a 3, and I'm going to save this, and now let's go ahead and run this code. So when I run the code, you'll see that nothing happens down here. Nothing got printed out of our program. In fact, when we call out this cube function, it really didn't do anything. So let me try and print it out. Maybe if we print out this function, it will give us back the information that we want. So let's try and add a print statement down here. So I can say print, and in here I can say cube. And when I run the program, you'll see that it says none. But really, this function is supposed to be cubing a number. And here's where I can use the return statement. I can come over here and I can say return, and our Python is going to return whatever value we put in here. So when I call this cube function and I can give it a 3, Python is going to go off and is going to execute this function. And when it sees this return statement, it's going to say, okay, we want to give back a value. So whenever I call this function, it's going to say, okay, I want to give a value back to whatever is calling this function. It's going to return this value when I print out cube 3. It should print out the answer, and we get an answer of 27 when I run the program, which is the correct answer. And I can do this with anything. Why don't we cube 4? And now when I run this program, you can see that we're getting the correct answer. So that's the basics of using this return statement. It allows us to return a value back to the caller, in other words, whatever is calling that function. So I want to illustrate this point a bit further. I'm going to come up here and I'm actually going to create a variable. So I'm going to call this variable result, and I'm going to set it equal to cube. For this variable result, it's going to store the value that gets returned from this cube function. So it's going to store whatever that gets returned from this function. Now if I come down here and I print out results, it's actually going to print out 64 again, because that's the value it's storing in this return statement. And that can be really useful for like getting information back from a function. We can use a parameter to give information to a function, and we can use the return statement to get information back from that function. I want to add one more thing. I'm not able to put any code after this return statement. So if I came down here and I tried putting a print statement, this isn't going to work. If I say print code, and when I run this program, it's not going to type out code. That's because when I use this return keyword, it breaks us out of that function. In other words, Python is going to go through and it's going to execute all the code in that function, and whenever it sees this return keyword, that's going to break out of that function, and we'll never be able to reach this line. And that's the basics of using a return statement. You can return any data type you want, and you could easily return a string, a boolean, an array. Doesn't really matter. You can return whatever you want. And a lot of times in a lot of situations, you'd want to get information back from a function. And that's it for this one. If you enjoyed or found this video helpful in any way, shape or form, then consider leaving a like and subscribing. Turn on post notifications to be the first to know when I upload a new video. Also, if you have any constructive criticism or any questions or anything, comment them down below. And until next time, thanks for watching. Peace.